My name is Licia Heath. I'm the CEO of Women for Election Australia. We are a non-partisan, not-for-profit with a mission to inspire more women to consider life in public office, but to also give them the tangible skills that equip them to run for public office as well. And I know the vast majority of you on this right now are our alumni, and so glad that you can be here to hear some of our inspirational speakers. Today is Sharman Stone. Sharman, welcome.
Thank you.
So great that you could join us. I am coming to you from the lands of the Gadigal and the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and to also future leaders emerging. Please put in the chat where you're joining us from today, everybody. I would also like to say that sovereignty of this land was never ceded, and it's my belief that until we reach a treaty with First Nations people, then our ability to move forward together is jeopardized. So on that note, Sharman, I have a lot of questions for you today, but I'm not going to take the mic for the whole time. I'm going to leave it to our audience as well. You've had such a fabulous career inside and outside of politics. I think one of the amazing things about, although you were in politics for a while, I wouldn't call you a career politician, because you had a career before and you've had a career afterwards. So maybe that's a great place to start. Tell us, before you entered politics, what were you doing? Did you have a profile in your community? To just shine a light on that for us.
Thanks, Licia. And let me acknowledge the Bangarang and Yorta Yorta, who are the traditional owners of the area of Shepparton, where I continue to live. Well, I was immediately before being elected the Manager for International Development at Melbourne University. I've been there about a year, but in fact what I was trying to do was recover my career from a run at getting state pre-selection in about 1990-91. Now, I'd been a senior public servant, you know, what we call the SES, the public service in the Department of Agriculture, as a director there. And it still is the case that if you want to run for Parliament, you throw in your public sector career. So I resigned from that position, immediately joined the Liberal Party because I hadn't been a member before. I don't believe public servants should be, you know, partisan. And I thought I'd have a year or so before the pre-selections for the state seats came up, because remember this was the dying days of the Kerner government, and there was an expectation that Jeff Kennett would probably get up, and he did in 1992. So I ran for pre-selection as a total novice, knew nothing about politics, but was totally, desperately wanting to make changes in what I saw as a senior public service, working directly to ministers, a debacle of poor talent, misguided, not good people in those positions. So I left the public service. I failed in my 2 attempts to get up in pre-selection. So what to do? Well, what do? I went and did my PhD with a fellowship from the Victorian government, which was beautiful, at Monash in economics and business. And then towards the end of that, about 3 years on, I thought, oh my God, I've got to get back into the workforce, because I was a key breadwinner for my family too. Went to Melbourne Uni, and in that role of international development, because my PhD was on international food trade and international trade. And I got a phone call from my dear friend Bev MacArthur, who was then country vice president of the Victorian division. And she said, you know, Sharm, you come from Northern, and I was living in Melbourne, had lived in Melbourne since I'd gone there to boarding school. She said, you're from Northern Victoria, you're now well known to the party. I'd been branch president and all those sorts of things. We've got this seat of Murray. Look, you can't win it. Just let me, you know, make sure you understand. It's the National Party's safest seat. It's their iconic Blackjack McEwen seat, but the members' bench has retired, so officially under our rules we can contest it. John Howard has agreed with Tim Fischer we won't contest it because it's their safest seat, but we've realised, Ted Baillieu, our president at the time, realised we should have someone on the ticket to get the Senate vote. So look, can we just use your name? You don't even have to go up there. There's no money, no branches. There's only a couple of months. This is now December we're talking. The election was in March. Do you mind if we just put your name down? Just to fill the gap on the how to vote card. And I thought about it for about 7 seconds, maybe 11. And I said, Bev, I'll do it and I'll win. So she repeated, no money, no branches, and you must not claim any attention from the Liberal campaign because you'll be contesting a National Party, three-cornered contest, can't distract from the Labor contest. So you're on your own. And you don't even have to go up there, she said. I said, don't worry, Bev, just leave it to me. All's good, job's right. So she said, look, we'll give you $7,000 for the how to vote cards, so you're not out of pocket. And that's it. If you spend any more, it's on your personal account, nothing. So that's how I came to be contesting the seat of Murray.
Right. Well, God, there's a lot in that. So you weren't massively upsold, I've got to say. But so you'd gone for pre-selection at the state level, hadn't succeeded, got the tap on the shoulder only once. They haven't had to ask you multiple times. And we say over and over again in our training, Sharman, timing is everything.
Absolutely. That's what I said to myself.
You won't feel ready, never feel ready.
No, that's what I said to myself, Licia. If I hadn't jumped at that chance, the next member for Murray, by the way, is now Nichols, it's had a name change, the next member would be there another 25 years. So Blackjack McEwen, I should say Sir John McEwen, had been the member for 45 years, I think. Bruce Lloyd had been the member for 25. I knew that it would be another 25 at least before I'd have a chance. And Murray was my home country. Murray is where I live and breathe and where my family had been for 5 generations and so on and so forth. So for me, this was like a gift from a fairy saying, do you want to give this a go? And of course, I did give it a crack and I was 10,000 ahead in primary votes at the end of the campaign, but I could have lost because Labor preferenced the Nats, and that's another story I won't take up your time with, but it's a story which made me a bit sad at the time. And I got up on Labor preferences, in effect, that Labor didn't follow their how to vote card as they were directed. There was a leakage of about 11 or 12%, which gave me enough to come in ahead of the Nat.
Right. Well, again, a lot in that. I mean, we spend so much time on preferences in our training. 90% of politicians in Australia get elected on preferences.
Mm-hmm,
so you got to understand it.
Mm-hmm,
and
you do.
And you've got to be strategic about it. Okay, so you won an election that you weren't supposed to win.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm right, you widened your margin on every subsequent federal election from that point on.
I have to correct you, Licia. Actually, I had 7 elections and they took away my home country, where I went to school in one of the redivisions of the boundaries. So I dropped down about 0.5% or so then, but I regained that next time round. So I was average about 20% margin all the way through, 19 to 20% margin.
Right. Well, I mean, considering how it was sold to you in the first place, it's an extraordinary achievement. But because you won the election you weren't expected to win and held it so strongly through that time, how did that determine or dictate how you operated in Canberra?
It had a profound impact, Licia, I think. But I'm also genetically predisposed to advocate, fight for causes, and be loyal and true, I suppose. So can you imagine, here I am contesting for the first time a woman in the electorate of Murray, first time a Liberal had contested it, because under party rules, a Liberal can't contest a sitting Nat or Liberal, as you know, in Victoria. So I was the first Liberal, the first woman. The Nats were shocked out of their brain to think I was contesting it, so they threw a fortune at it. And I only had that $7,000 had been already spent on the how to vote cards. So I had to I put my entire life savings into the effort up front, which was only at the time 23,000. And then I had to raise cash every day to buy ads for the TV, the radio, print stuff, put fuel on the vehicle. And the electorate was huge, 20,000 square kilometres, something, 62 towns, 2 cities. And so I had to keep saying to the electorate, trust me, I'm a local, I'm yours, born and bred. Now, this is the thing about those who are listening in. Rural seats are very different in terms of their expectations of the member compared to metro. In metro, if I was going for the seat of Port of Melbourne, say, or Higgins, you walk down the main streets of Stonington or wherever, maybe 1 out of every 10 you pass, maybe less, is actually from that electorate because they're all commuting into work or shop or whatever. In the electorate, a rural electorate, you can pretty much guarantee, you could in Murray, every person you passed in a street or in a car driving down a road was your constituent. Mm. And they expected to know you. And they expected you to be at their every event across 42 towns and 2 cities. Sorry, 64 towns and 2 cities. And I had won the election on the basis that I used the F word continuously. I said, I am going to fight for you. And my ads, which were the National Party ads, were beautiful. They were like toilet paper ads with beautiful music and waving wheat crops, fuzzy in the distance. My ads were up front, pretty crude, made by the local furniture salesman man, because I couldn't afford more, but besides it worked. And I'm standing beside the petrol pump saying, look at this, look how much we have to pay for petrol. I'm going to fight to see that we get justice and are not paying 20 cents more per litre for our fuel. So I've made all those commitments and I wasn't going to then disappear into the party in Canberra as soon as I got elected. 1, it's not my nature, I guess, but 2, they'd taken a hell of a risk on me, especially when the first thing that happened in the electorate was the massacres down in Port Arthur. And the men said, oh my God, we've elected a woman and she's a Liberal and we've got our guns. She won't understand that they're going to take our guns. What have we done? So, it was very important. And all through my political career, I'm infamous, I guess, go look at all my cartoons against me, for not saying the party is dictating what we must do. I always took the view, does this work for my electorate? I was party loyal, absolutely, but when it came to them saying we're going to abolish SPC, I had to say, sorry, you're not. And that led to all sorts of infamy, as you probably aware. And there was others, I could go on issues. I had to say, no, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for my electorate or for the broader community either when it came to the abortion pill.
Well, you're certainly well known, Sharman, as not just being a woman in politics, it's such an easy thing to say, but being a courageous woman in politics as well. So let's go to Canberra now. I mean, you were parliamentary secretary to a couple of ministers through your time there, and then you served as the Minister for Workforce Participation under John Howard in 2006. Tell us, because we don't know, what is that evolution, going from a backbencher parliamentary secretary minister? How different are those roles? And were you the only female voice in the cabinet at that stage? How was that working?
Well, at that stage this year, that ministry was out of cabinet. I then went on to be shadow cabinet at the time of that. So, okay, in my second year, 1996, I was elected. In 1998, remember we had a very short first term there. It was a GST election and it was gun control, all those things happened. So in 1998, I didn't expect it at all. I was, in fact, down the paddock. And Australia's got this amazing system where you get a phone call from the Prime Minister or the Leader of the Opposition, if you're not in power, who says to you, you may not be waiting by the phone, will you please be my Minister or Parley Sec? It's a one-on-one thing. There's no job application process. Absolutely not. It's,
Yeah.
It's a captain's pick. So John Howard rang me and he said, would you be my parliamentary secretary for the environment and heritage? And this was only 2 years after I'd been elected. And of course, I was blown away. So of course. And I said to John, and that will use all my environmental credentials because I'd done my master's on environmental degradation and I'd spent half my career fighting Northern Victorian environmental degradation. And he said, oh, you've got some environment background. Little lesson, ladies and gentlemen listening. It's not based on merit and your knowledge of the portfolio. Anyway, so off I went. Now, I was, in hindsight, it was actually too soon for me to be promoted, really, because I hadn't learned the politics of survival at that stage, probably. So what I did in my new portfolio, Robert Hill was my minister, probably the best environmental minister I think Australia's ever had. He put up the EPBC Act, for example, a whole range of amazing initiatives that he had. Superb advisors. They weren't just party hacks. They were in their own right environmental specialists. So I'm parliamentary secretary and I'm behaving like a public servant. I immediately dived in, totally consumed, and I was in charge of the Antarctic Division and the Bureau of Meteorology, all the Indigenous heritage. Fabulous, absolutely gorgeous experience. Worked my tail off to make change. I believe I did make some significant changes and developments. 5 years on, I'm still in that portfolio because I'm loving it. But then what I should have done after a couple of years, I should have said to John, I'm ready now, Prime Minister, to move on. But anyway, I then realised, oops, I better move on. So I said to someone, how do I get myself in front of John Howard to get a promotion or a different portfolio? And this chap said to me, well, what did you ask for? Oh, do you ask? I thought, like a stupid woman, so many of us are, I thought if you worked your backside off and achieved and had outcomes and scores on the book, you know the story.
Yeah.
So anyway, this person said, look, what do you want to do? I said, I want to do finance because it's a non-traditional woman's role and I don't want to be typecast, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, I'll speak to Peter Costello about that, fellow Victorian. So anyway, reshuffle, I get a phone call from John Howard saying, will you be Parliamentary Secretary for Agriculture? So I said, okay. I thought, well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm in the car, actually, at the time, driving in the electorate to a place, and I've got an arranged Warren Truss and said, John, I'm your new Parliamentary Secretary. He said, hey, what happened to Judith Trower? I said, I don't know. Anyway, so we agreed to meet, put the phone down, turned off my mobile, and immediately John Howard rings me back and he says, look, actually, will you be Parliamentary Secretary for Finance? So it does work. You've got to ask. Anyway, I then became the Minister for Workforce Participation, following from Peter Dutton. Michaelia Cash followed on for me. It's totally different as a minister. You have a huge lot of staff extra, for example. You move to the blue carpet, the ministerial suite. Your status changes completely. The media start to be interested in you, right? For good or bad. Patricia Cavalis at the time was one of the most busy members in the gallery at the time on my portfolio issues. So totally different. The tragedy for me was that then John Howard, we lost the election. We went into shadowhood and the spinning, Brendan Nelson, Malcolm, Abbott, and that was horrific as a shadow minister. When we got to Tony Abbott, of course, given my history with Tony Abbott, he sacked me from the ministry. But and that's always a great, what shall we say, spine strengthening experience. So then I focused on the international work that I've always been doing, and which led it then in turn to other things.
Impressive, Sharman, and yes, the way I can sympathise, not asking for things, working tail off, wanting 100% of the skills before applying for the position, and I think there's a much broader reckoning of that. and I see it with the young women who attend our courses now, that have a much better sense of self-advocacy.
Yes.
Which it gives me extraordinary hope. Look, I want to focus on Canberra for just a little bit longer in terms of we are so well informed, Sharman, about the negatives of going into politics, but there are so many positives, and I believe that the positives outweigh the negatives. So give us some tangible examples of how you being involved in politics not only helped in policy for the nation, but closer to home. What were you able to achieve for your community through being at that leadership table?
Absolutely. Every day I served for my 20 years as a member of Parliament, it was an honour and a privilege to serve, which sounds like a truism, no, but it really was.
Fabulous.
I grew up in the electorate that I served. My family had been there 5 generations, which is typical of all of one half of the electorate. No big deal. We're all there from 1880s, 1860s. So being able to serve my own home country is, as I described, one half of the electorate, which is the northern Victorian half. And the other half, Goulburn Valley side, extraordinarily challenging, with big Indigenous population, big migrant refugee population, worst drought on record, millennium drought, worst floods on record, destruction of the irrigation system through government policy, Murray-Darling Basin Plan, irrigation system which had the biggest dairy industry in Australia on it, no more, now lost. So I had these enormous challenges for those 20 years in my electorate. And at the same time, there are a lot of national challenges I took up as well. But in the electorate, what was I able to achieve? Well, for example, one of the best things, when I first got elected, there was no bulk billing in the entire electorate except in the Indigenous Rumballara clinic in Shepparton. Murray is the second or third poorest electorate in Australia in terms of income. So no bulk billing, imagine it. People weren't able to go to the doctor. So the first thing I was able to get through Michael Wooldridge's brilliant ministry, he was the Minister of Health first up for John Howard, I managed to get the Department of Rural Health Clinical School established in Shepparton, run by Melbourne University. This is a new initiative of Wooldridge, and these were put all around Australia. And people said, well, in Victoria, that particular program, or the funding for one only each, would go to Bendigo, Ballarat, Geelong. They're the ugly sisters. They always get the good stuff in Victoria for regional handouts. Shepparton, come on. Now, of course, Shepparton's only 40,000, Bendigo's 100,000. But I said to Wooldridge, listen, we've got the poverty, we've got the health challenges of those different sectors I've just described. And so I managed to get it for Shepparton. That
amazing
changed the health ecosystem entirely for the electorate, which still resonates, brings doctors to the area. We've now got every man whose dog can get bulk billed, blah, 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 blah. That was huge. I managed to do that. Of course, managed to stop the pipeline taking our water to Melbourne, stop the pipe. It was called horrific campaign. This was during the worst drought on record. I've got to write the book about that. Saved SPC because Tony Abbott had decided he'd use the loss of the last fruit manufacturing company in Australia. He'd use that as a trigger for a Royal Commission into unions. He'd say that the trade unions had killed SPC, so we must have a Royal Commission. Well, it wasn't anything to do with the trade unions. So I saved SPC, and now it goes from strength to strength. Now, through COVID, it made a fortune because of all of preserved fruit. It's now the first to have COVID vaccinations. It's now fantastic. Got the first Congolese from in Australia as settlers into Shepparton. And this is my whole thing about if you're going to have refugees settling in Australia, why do we keep settling them in Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney, when they're from rural areas typically? They're from the back blocks of the Sudan or Somalia or, in this case, Congo. So I talked John Howard into letting me have a trial bring a group of new refugees who hadn't been in Australia before to a rural regional setting. And we prepared for them for about 6 months in the electorate, brought in 10 families initially, each with about 10 kids, including single father parents and so on. Fabulous success. Changed again the face of the population in Shep because we brought the Africans in to complement the Middle Easters and the Pacific Islanders and the, you name it. Managed to bring in 2 in the electorate to get drought relief in an irrigation area, got the legislation changed. I mean, lots of those sorts of things, but nationally, because we're running out of time, I'm sure, nationally, I managed to get fetal alcohol spectrum disorder onto the national agenda, brought it in as a private member's bill, which I still had to take through the party room. I had to bring it back twice because the party room kept saying, nanny state, you know, how dare you suggest we tell women what to do with their bodies? Excuse me.
Ironic.
Yeah. So managed to get a national inquiry into FASD in Australia. That's, of course, where alcohol exposure to the fetus causes brain damage. And they managed to get the national inquiry, which led to a national program, which now is in its 2nd iteration. I'm still on the national advisory body to that. So it was bringing me head first against the alcohol lobby, hugely powerful in Australia and hugely influential in Parliament, state and federally, because of the monies they donate to all parties. So FASD was a biggie. RU486, the abortion pill.
We've just got revisited that, haven't we, in terms of...
Have you?
With misrepresented, anyone who watched that show.
Yeah, but that wasn't quite accurate, actually. It suggested that it was just a Senate job. The Senate, as you know, all legislation or regulation, if it's disallowable instrument, has to get through the Senate and the reps. The Senate was comparatively not that hard. Well, it was difficult, but not amazing. It was in the reps where we had Tony Abbott, Kevin Andrews, a whole cabal of Labor and Liberal and National Party strongly convicted against abortion members, including John Howard was also opposing. And I worked with, I led the reps campaign with Julia Gillard in particular, leading, then in opposition, leading the Labor side, and we managed to get a conscience vote into the House of Reps. Now, that was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And that was really pushed by Labor and Libs because they knew if we didn't have a conscience vote, as you know, with the Labor Party, if you go against your caucus, you're expelled. Yep. There is no wriggle room at all.
Can't cross the floor like you can.
Yep. In the Liberal Party, and that's, you can cross, it's a career limiting thing to do, but you can cross the floor without losing pre-selection. So therefore, we managed to get a conscience vote and we won. Extraordinary achievement and still resonating 10 years later. I'm now an advisor to SPHERE, the Sexual Reproductive Health, CRE, and so on. I keep doing that work. But that brought women together bipartisanly, which I think has been referenced a few times. The only time in my whole 20 years we got women across parties working together.
Yeah, well, that's going to parlay beautifully into my next question. But I mean, even just, I know you achieved much more than you've gone through there, but you know, I can see in the way that you're talking about it, it's this combination of both humbling and pride, you know, being able to achieve those things and that legacy that's still there, Sharman. And I think, had you not been in there or your equivalents not been in there through that time, because if there was, you know, if you've got a conservative element against you, the absence of anyone opposing them or wanting to collaborate or find middle ground, then that's a big problem.
Well, it's a huge problem given the culture of our parliament. If you choose to go against your party, then that is a serious there are serious consequences for you. For example, when RU 486 happened, in other words, when Tony Abbott announced that he would bring a veto into Parliament, not allowing it to ever, requiring the Minister for Health, whoever that was in the day, that they would have the power of vetoing that abortion drug being accessible in Australia, which was first introduced as a bargaining chip by Senator Harradine in 1996, so we could get his vote to sell Telstra. So both a gag rule was brought in 1996, which meant no foreign aid to be spent on women's reproductive health, particularly abortion support, and the RU 486 measure. I didn't know about that in 1996. So I had known, I would have started right from day one fighting it. I wasn't aware of it. It was the best kept secret. But when it came to Tony Abbott making his move, my God, we had to do something about that. As a feminist, as a person believing in a woman's bodily autonomy. But I was a parliamentary secretary at the time, and for me, therefore, to go against my party meant I should have lost my portfolio instantly. But as it turned out, John Howard didn't do that, and so I think he'll go down. Still is not as appreciated as he should be in terms of what he achieved as Prime Minister at the time.
Yeah, well, in terms of your experience in Canberra, and before lockdown, I was in Canberra quite a lot, and we've just recently established a parliamentary friends group of Women for Election Australia, bringing together women from across the House of Reps, Senate, all parties, all corners of the country. And I note that Australia is the only country in the OECD that does not have a cross-party, a formal women's caucus or forum or alliance.
Yep.
So in the absence of that, did you have the opportunity to come together as women cross-party in something other than policy or RU 486?
Well, I did, because I'm a bit like that, I guess. I take risks. And in Parliament, I didn't obey all those old conventions of the people across the aisle are the enemy. You do not speak to them. You do not sit with them in the dining room. They're at the other end of the room. You do not talk to them in the corridors, and so on. So I worked bipartisanly or cross-party on a number of issues. For example, medicinal cannabis. I co-hosted that legislation with the Greens, Richard Di Natale, and a number of women. Also, Dying with Dignity, the euthanasia legislation, again, engaged cross-party with women. So it didn't faze me because I'm a conviction politician, not just there to get to be Prime Minister. And I have to say, I never aspired to be Prime Minister. Second time around, if I had another 20 years, maybe I would. But my first 20 years, no, I didn't aspire to that. I aspired to be a minister, not
Are you launching a campaign, Sharman? Checking.
No, I'm regularly asked to run as a candidate as an independent, I have to tell you still, but I think there are others now in continuing, including those watching this thing.
I was just checking.
Now should step up. But you asked me about women. You also do meet women from the other parties, of course, in committee work.
Yep.
If you're a senator, in estimates, of course, but then you're often opposing. But in committees, you're on the same side.
We never hear about committees, Sharman, ever.
Well, look,
never.
This really drives me crazy.
Yep.
Committees do some extraordinarily important work. They can do, or they can be filibustering time wasters. The Leader of the House, for much of my time there, I'm sure, saw committees as just keeping you busy, making sure the backbenchers are all on committees so they couldn't plot and scheme in dark corners. A lot of the committees are replicated, Senate and Reps, or their joint standing committees. I often wonder why the media, for heaven's sake, they'd be watching like little leeches question time to get a grab for the night's TV. Meanwhile, in a committee of that day, there might have been some extraordinary revelation about for me, extraordinary anyway, about suicide rates in the Defence Force, or what was happening in Mongolia with fetal alcohol, whatever. But media don't go to the committees. The committees take you all around Australia on hearings. That's where you're meeting the women from other parties all the time and the men from other parties. So, yes, there are a lot of opportunities, but more powerful than all of that is the overriding culture of disunity is death to your party, and your party must keep its secrets, and you mustn't be seen to be chatting to the opposition because you just might inadvertently, drop something that's useful to them because you've got to kill them. Our Westminster system says winner take all. There's no second prize. It's either us in power or them. And if you in any way facilitate them, then you shouldn't be in the place. So that's the way it works and functions.
Yeah, that adversarial component probably hasn't improved since you've left. Okay, I've got two more questions for you. We'll get through these relatively quickly because I see questions building up in the chat. So not long after you retired from politics, so you retired in 2016, you got the coveted position of ambassador representing women and girls after Natasha Spoyer stepped down. And I note that Julianne Guevara now has the role, first ever Indigenous woman to hold an ambassador role for Australia. What did that role entail, and how did you get to influence policy relating to women and girls in that role as well?
Well, I got the name change. It's now called the Ambassador for Gender Equity.
Take that, language matters.
Incredibly so, absolutely. Because when you say women and girls, the men say, "Oh, thank God, that's not about us." We can have the women's meeting off to the side, and they can talk about gender-based violence, all by themselves, and shout at each other in the echo chamber. But when you call it gender equity, it implies that you're all in there.
Yep.
Whatever your gender, whatever your gender identity. So it is the most wonderful role. Julie Bishop and Malcolm Turnbull gave it to me. I'd, of course, when Tony said my services as a minister were no longer needed, having been a minister for, I think, 13 or 14 years or whatever, and in many shadow portfolios after the change of government, I then said, right, I'll now focus on my international work, and I became the Australian representative in the Asia-Pacific Parliamentarians for Population Development, which is Japan and Australia funded. It's now collapsed tragically, but that consisted of meetings with all like-minded members of Parliament, like-minded men into gender equity across Asia-Pacific, and would meet every, say, quarter, maybe in Nepal, Mongolia, Sri Lanka, wherever, with other members of Parliament who want, and together we'd say, right, how are we going to help change your legislation for child marriage protection, or to abolish female genital mutilation, or to stop slavery, or whatever. So I was in that work very much in my last 4 years in Parliament, which, if you like, opened the door to my understandings of what was needed in the region, what perhaps I could do. So as the Ambassador for Women and Girls, I had 3 pillars, they were described as, to with the Australian aid budget of about $4 billion a year, 80% has to be spent on women's benefit outcomes. So my job was to politically empower women in the Indo-Asia Pacific, to economically help empower them, and to eradicate violence against women and girls. And so I went to all of our countries. I think I was on about 80 visits, 40 different countries, including the UN and Geneva, and multilaterals through Africa and Europe, all the time, looking at what our aid was doing. Was it hitting the nail on the head? Was it achieving outcomes or not? And feeding that back to Julie Bishop if I felt it wasn't. But also meeting up with our Australian Awards alumni. These are all the people from the different countries who get to do PhDs and masters and grad diplomas and whatever in Australia, and they go back to their home countries, and they're the most stunning collection of inspired and inspiring women and men developing their countries. I kept meeting with them. I met with all our Australian volunteers abroad who do amazing work. And it was the most inspirational 3 years. Also frustrating because I was dipping in and dipping out of each country on a 4-day visit. And I always said, I don't just want to meet the ministers and the prime ministers and in the cities. I want to get into the back blocks, get down and dirty in the slums of Pakistan or high country of PNG or wherever, out from the cities, which was great for all the ambassadors and high commissioners that I was working with in each of these countries, because it gave them the excuse to get out too on gender-related issues.
Yeah.
It was just fabulous 3 years. And I'd, of course, spent 3 months at the UN New York when I was a parliamentarian, and I was able to build on that experience, particularly through UNFPA, UN Women. And I was at the same time serving one of the world's biggest INGOs, the International Planned Parenthood Federation, which Australia DFAT funds in a big way. I was on that board at the same time, focusing on sexual reproductive health. So it all married in beautifully.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a coveted role, and you can have extraordinary impact in that role, as you can as an MP, minister, backbencher, councillor as well. So my last question, from one, Sharman, from one coveted ambassador role to another, you've signed on as an ambassador for Women for Election.
Yep.
Which is absolutely terrific. We're so delighted to have you as one of our ambassadors. Tell me, why is it important to you to support our work to inspire and equip more women to run in this country?
Well, I had a very salutary experience when I decided to retire from my seat of Murray. 20% margin, what's there not to love? Beautiful seat. And I looked for women to replace me. Okay, I'm being out about it. I actually didn't say who's the best candidate. I said I want a woman candidate to follow on because she will be the best anyway, all things considered. I asked women who I thought would be magnificent, including my own daughter, who was the same age as I was when I entered Parliament at that time. I got, no way, thanks, no way. We're not interested in exposing ourselves like that. Loss of anonymity, media dragging us down, the violence of the abuse and the being away from home, or we're doing, we think, good things in our current profession or role, and we think we can make just as much of an impact and a difference without sacrificing our family and our personal lives. So that was very salutary, getting that feedback. And in the end, there was only one woman pre-selection candidate out of the 9 or 10 for the Liberal Party for Murray, which is very disappointing. So there is a huge need to be able to communicate effectively to brilliant women to have a go. And Australia, our Parliament, needs at least 50%, if not more, women to change the culture and to also change, I think, the population's now very strong sense of cynicism about our parliamentary democracy. Since I left Parliament, it is almost universal in my electorate where I still live, of course. People say, oh, bet you're lucky to have got out of that. Isn't it shocking? Oh, we can't be watching it on TV, and they should all just be taken out and shot. They're just a disgrace, etc. And that is a very bad thing for a parliamentary democracy. So we need women, good women, who will put their hand up, who have a different style of achieving, and who will cut through the nonsense, I think, if there are sufficient of them in Parliament, won't be captured by party politics entirely, even if they're party members. I'm not saying they'll all be independents, but will not see that to succeed, all they've got, what they must do is be a yes person to the party, faction, or leadership that still is totally male dominated in all parties. So that's why I really want to see women come through, young women, women of colour, Indigenous. I really strongly believe we should have seats dedicated to Indigenous men and women, people with different abilities, different genders. All of those sorts of Australians need to be in Parliament to make it more inclusive and representative. We need quotas. I'm sorry, we need quotas. In the Liberal Party in particular, they're not ideal. There can be bad things happen if the culture isn't ready for it, but we need quotas or nothing will change. So that's why I'm here. I'm now a professor of practice at Monash, having been the founding patron of the Centre for Gender, Peace and Security at Monash, and as the professor of practice at Monash in gender, peace, security, politics and international development, I'm always saying to the students who are so engaged often in politics, international development, say, for heaven's sake, have you thought about running for Parliament? And, you know, a very significant number of the women say, yes, we have, but, you know, it's a big ask. It took me years to recover my career from a aborted run, if you like, for what I had to sacrifice to run the first time for a state seat. It is a huge ask. Once you have been elected, if you're a woman, you're probably in a marginal seat. You might only last a term or two. Getting back into a career can be very difficult. And if you're the breadwinner of a family or by yourself, that is, you know, critically important, because the super now for parliamentarians is shocking, very poor. So lots of things to think about. But I'm hoping, if I can contribute, Licia, to this fantastic organisation, I'll do all I can, because we need, the country needs good women.
Just fabulous. I'm not going to lie, I did a bit of a jig after our first phone call when you said you'd come online, you'd come on board as an ambassador. So, you know, and let's go to questions from the chat, because there are a number there, Sharman, but I think you've just produced our social media grabs for the next fortnight, I think. Some of those statements were just bang on. A question from Marie. Sharman, it's 25 years since we were elected. What's changed? You're quoted as saying women are considered shrill and hysterical if they raise voices, or weak if they shed a tear. How does the treatment of women in their workplace, Parliament, influence young women and girls observing a verbally combative environment? So I think in part you've just kind of addressed part of that. You know, will the proposed code of conduct change the culture in reality? Only if it's adopted, I suspect. But Sharman?
Well, hi, Marie. Marie is one of those stunning women who became a state member with having babies while she was a member and so on.
Fabulous, Marie.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Absolutely. You know what it's like to juggle those caring responsibilities with also the civic duties as a parliamentarian. What has changed in 25 years? I have to say, I hoped it would have been entirely different from 1996 to 2000 and whatever we are in now, 21. It's not different. Even though Labor, with its quota type strategy, has now got 50-50 women in the Senate and getting there, close to that in reps. When you look at the standing orders in Parliament, when you look at the way men continue to command the heights and their behaviours, which are associated with leadership, are still dominant, that's problematic for women who want to behave more collegiately, have a caucus with other women from other other parties, for example, be more likely to work in a bipartisan manner. I mean, I was really saddened a couple of days ago when the leadership spill of the state Liberal Party was on, and someone was quoted from the Liberal Party saying, the current leader has not landed a blow on the Premier during COVID, you know, as if that was what it was about. You had to have killed him. You had to have physically landed a blow to have been effective as a leader. Well, hello, what about...
Got to roll with the punches, Sharman.
What about having had superb alternative policy, strategy, ways to get through this dilemma, rather than just how effectively did you punish, kill off, intimidate, assault the other side? I think so I don't think much has changed. A lot. I have an MA student at the moment, Eliza Cotton, fabulous human being. She's doing her thesis on why do women resign from Parliament federally at greater rates than men. Very important question. Women resign. Now, I can't preempt her outcome, I mustn't, but if you look at the data, you see some brilliant younger women and they talk out loud about, we can't do this without caring responsibilities.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we share those caring responsibilities with partners so that a woman has the equivalent of a wife when she goes into Parliament? And I always wished I had a wife. They were handy if you're a parliamentarian.
Yeah. Oh. A couple of other questions here. I just want to talk about everything you just said, but I refuse. I'm going to go into from Bethany. You established a National Portrait Gallery in Canberra. Thank you. So here's a question. What will it take to get a women's caucus going again?
Well, as people know, with the help of this organisation and others, there's now a friendship group, a women's friendship group in Parliament. It's just started, which is bipartisan. That's a very good thing. And good on them, because it's not easy. You are under suspicion immediately from the blokes. It's a funny thing, you know, when you walk down the corridor, I often observe this. If you walk down the parliamentary corridors, these long, faceless green tunnels in the rep, and there's up in the far distance a little cluster of, say, 3 or 4 women together talking, and a bloke is approaching, that man will invariably say, oh, what are you up to? What are you girls up to? Women don't say that to a group of men in a little group talking. Yep. You just say, oh, these men are talking whatever they want to talk about. But women are, oh, what are you chicks up to? It always annoyed the hell out of me, I have to say. I presume there's a bit of suspicion about this group, potentially, from more conservative. Must say, what are they, feminist, you know, a pair of chicks, are they? What are they up to? But good on them. And let's hope it grows and becomes the equivalent of a women's caucus, because just imagine during this COVID thing, if we'd had a women's cross-party caucus, it could really have focused perhaps earlier on the mental health of the lockdown, women homeschooling their kids, dealing with a partner who they don't want to be locked up in the same house with, the incredible additional work of their own career coming to try on, the mental health issues. I think that would have been a much earlier, more balanced costing of the pandemic if women had been able to have been heard, as well as just the disease references of cost. You know, how many beds have we got left in the hospitals? Now, let's look at, I think women would have brought a much broader perspective to bear. And so good on you that friendship group is exceptionally important, and long may it survive and grow.
Thank you, Sharman. Look, I'm going to do a big shout out to the 10 parliamentarians that signed on to form that group. You know, and a couple of them did say to us, I was told not to do this.
Yeah.
But I said, screw it.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Big shout out to those 10.
It would have been not a career enhancing move for some of them. And good on them, because that's what we've got to break through. The expectations that a woman will be like a guy in Parliament, like a man, and therefore, you know, the enemy's the other side and we won't speak. And
Well, that kind of leads into the next question from Julianne. Pressure from critics, the other side, is to be expected. But how do you respond to pressure from within your party when you are meant to fall in line? Is this harder to do?
Yeah. I'll never forget, he was foolish to do it, an email that was sent to me by this male colleague, Liberal male colleague, when I was at the height of the SPC battle, where I'd stood up and said, no, you're not right what you said about why SPC should not get its $17 million grant, which was then going to be matched by the state, which would then have led up to 117 mil, which would have saved the company. He said, you shouldn't have done that because now all of our constituents reckon we should do that. In other words, stand up for us. And I thought, my goodness me, how extraordinary. But anyway, why I wasn't sleepless or cowed by the thought of calling out my then leader a liar publicly, which was kind of accidental in one sense. I got tricked by them, not tricked, but the media said to me, as they will, so you're saying he isn't correct in what he's saying about SPC? And I said, that's right, he is not correct. And so the journo said, so he's a liar. Now, a typical Polly would have dissembled at that point and said, well, he wasn't correct. And I said, yes, he's a liar. The L word is not one you typically use against your party leader, but it got me another 15 front pages for another week and it helped drive home the message. So I don't withdraw from that. And he was lying about, I could give you rank and file why, how, and whatever. But the reason why I was sleeping at night was because my electorate was behind me. My electorate was saying, Sharman, thank heavens, you've saved 4,000 jobs directly through the stand you're taking because the factory would be closing, the orchards were being bulldozed, the box making factory was shutting, the transport sector was already laying off staff. People were saying, thank you, please do not deviate from the path you're taking. And my local branches, my local Liberal Party members were 100% behind me. So, for example, when I won the seat of Murray, there was not a single Liberal branch I lie. There were 7 Liberal Party members in the electorate when I won the seat. I won it with the support of non-Liberal Party members, but once elected, I converted a lot of those people to Liberal Party members and I created 6 branches. Those members stayed with me loyal and true, the same people as my office bearers my entire 20 years. And they were saying, Sharman, thank heavens you're standing up for us because without the fruit manufacturing industry, the economy of the Goulburn Valley is dead. So it wasn't hard. It wasn't hard to be in the party room and be a pariah and have people saying to me, this is rebounding on us in our electors because they want to know why we didn't stand up for the freeway going through the local cemetery or something.
Well, I think just going to focus on one particular point there that, is it harder against your own party, regardless of the party? Something we say in our training workshops all the time are understand clearly why you want to run.
Exactly.
What are your values?
Yes.
It is that that will help you on those harder days.
And have integrity, but you also have to know what your constituency wants. You have to be so closely in touch and communicating with them so you're not running off on your own frolic. So imagine if I imagined that what they really wanted was an international airport in Shepparton, when they didn't, but I thought this is a good thing, I'll really go for that. So you've got to know what your electorate is actually thinking, feeling, experiencing in order for you to represent them effectively. And that means 24/7, being at every... People said to me, why do you keep going to the Lions changeover dinners at that little 400-person town? I mean, come on, And I'd say, hey, I go not to get the tail twister jokes against me and to have a dinner of yet again, Sara Lee cheesecake. No, I go because there'll be people at that dinner who will never otherwise pick up the phone or drive to Shepparton or come to one of my local meetings to talk to me. It will be a place for me to have one-on-one, face-on-face conversations with people in all these little tiny places right around the electorate. So, you know, you've just got to do those hard yards and those very, very intense and localised communication, so you can always be sure that you're not rushing off on your own personal agenda, but you're reflecting what they want and need, or sometimes you're influencing them to think of things they hadn't thought of. But, you know, that's what being a House of Representatives, it's totally different than the Senate, of course. There you're with your party and you're representing a state, unless you're independent. But in the reps, the House of Reps, it is all about your constituency, as far as I'm concerned, particularly in a rural area. The thing about being a rural House of Reps member, of course, is you'll never be a Prime Minister, because I don't believe there will ever again be a rural derived Prime Minister in Australia, because it doesn't work for the media. But
that's interesting. Never say never. But I understand your thinking there.
The last one was Fraser, and because the radio you can handle from long distance, television you can't. It's all about the cameras, I'm afraid. Social media is not the same as television cameras. It's changed a little, but because of the intensity, and electorates once would forgive you, like John Anderson imagined when he was Deputy Prime Minister. He went and lived in Canberra, right?
Yeah.
With his family. His children went to school in Canberra and so on. His electorate finally said to him, you better come back here or else.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, look, Sharman, there's a couple more questions. We're not going to get to them. I promised you would be gone by 2:00, and I've gone over by 4 minutes. But I just want to touch on that last piece, you know, about knowing your electorate. And of course, so many of the women on this call, our alumni, the women coming to our courses, they already know their electorate. They're already doing umpteen hours of volunteer work in their electorate. They are head of the PNC or the business chamber or the CWA or whatever it happens to be. And it's those skills that are totally transferable to elected office.
Absolutely. That's why women make superb marginal seat members. They shouldn't always be relegated to the marginal seats, but because that's what the boys let them be pre-selected for. But when you see a woman operating in a marginal seat, it is a thing of extraordinary power, because she does know how to communicate. She's got those grassroots capabilities. She knows about community development. So women, may you not be all relegated to marginal seats, but when you get into Parliament with that grassroots knowledge and experience, you're all the more powerful and influential from day go, because you know what your electorate needs and wants.
Yeah, as you well proved, Sharman. So thank you again, not just for signing on as an ambassador for our work, but for your time today.
My pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure hearing your journey and hearing your passion to see more women enter politics as well. And the comments have said just as much. And just so thank you, everybody. The Zoom clap. Thank you for all of you for bearing with us. Remember that our next go to the event site on our webpage. All this month's training has sold out, but so we've put on extra training for October and November, and we would love to see you there. But Sharman, thank you. Everybody get to the rest of their day. Stay safe for those of you in lockdown, and for those of you not in lockdown, congratulations. Enjoy.
Lovely talking to all, and may all of you pursue a parliamentary career.
Yes.
Okay.
Hallelujah. Terrific. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.